Hello, my name is Matthew, and we are on shelf 34 of my tiny house library tour. And if you're interested in any of the books I'm going to show, please let me know. You can send me an email and we can work something out. You'll be supporting my plans to visit Spain and see a beautiful young lady. I have a GoFundMe link as well if that interests you, but let's look at the books. This is our last shelf, and I don't know about you, but for as fun as this has been, I'm actually quite happy that we are at the end. It's almost entirely Penguin Black Spine Penguin classics, so let's just get started. Pull out. Okay. We have The House of the Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne, and I only just read this at the end of last year, and I thought it was fantastic. It's a claustrophobic, atmospheric, gothic novel. I just loved it. Longus by Daphnis and Chloe by Longus, another one of these ancient Greek novels. And I have such a sweet tooth for. There's only a handful of these ancient Greek novels, but they're all great. Conversations of Socrates by Xenophon. Really interesting to get a totally different portrait of who Socrates was as a man. There's only a few different texts that I've read other than Plato, and it's really enlightening to see just different sides of Socrates as a man and a almost nearly mythological figure. So different Spartan figures from Plutarch, an amazing cover. It's one of my favorite, most striking covers. Okay, translated by Richard Talbert. Melmoth the Wanderer. It's by Charles Robert Maturin, and it's a gothic novel. It's supernatural horror. Does it say when it was written? 1820. And Charles Maturin is somehow related to Oscar Wilde. And when Oscar Wilde was in his self-imposed exile in France, the story goes he was going by the name Sebastian Melmoth, which was reference to this book. And it's one of those recurring themes in some of the Gothic novels that I've read. The idea of being cursed with immortality. In fact, you can see that in the picture of Dorian Gray. This is a very strange novel. Look at that cover. Theaetetus by Plato. Is this the one about wisdom? I can't remember. Okay, on knowledge. This is quite good. I enjoyed this dialogue. I guess we'll just take out these chunks. Fear and Trembling by Soren Kierkegaard. It's a philosophical work. Poems and Letters by Michelangelo, and these are fantastic. He wrote lovely sonnets, come across as lovely in translation anyway, and his letters are just incredibly interesting. He's one of my favorite artists, so I really enjoy learning about his personal life and things like that. And Yeah, just a really cool Michelangelo drawing. Unreal. Dubliners by James Joyce. Uh, Probably my favorite thing by James Joyce. I, th- I find a lot of these stories to be really strong. Okay. Critique of Pure Reason by Immanuel Kant. Um, and I just can't do it. I've put in, I think, a solid effort, and I'm okay not not being uh, able to receive his pearls of wisdom. Daniel Deronda, Daniel Deronda by George Eliot. I haven't read this yet, so hopefully this will come up sooner or later. But at some point, I want to read everything by George Eliot. Black No More by George S. Schuler. I read this a few years ago. Um, it's. Let me read the back. Yeah, yeah. It's like a social satire. It's this. There's this new process to dye black people's skin and turn their skin white. And um, actually, I didn't think the novel was all that great, but the the satire and the message and um, a lot of the themes that go throughout the book really hit a nerve. We'll just do all the ones on the top. Get that out of the way. Sentimental Education, translated by Robert Baldick. One of my favorite novels. One of my favorite authors, Gustave Flaubert. The Conquest of Gaul by Caesar. Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. One of the first classics that I read that really pulled the curtain back and showed me how enjoyable all of these old books can be. um, Hashish, A Smuggler's Tale by Henry de Montfrey. This was recommended to me by my old friend Bob. Um, not not serious literature or anything, but a really interesting adventure tale. I really love maritime seafaring stories. Poor Folk and Other Stories by Dostoevsky, another great collection of short stories. Let me see what this has. Poor Folk, The Landlady, Mr. Prokharchkin, Paul Zunkov. Okay, so a couple short stories by Dostoevsky. Confessions of an English Opium Eater and Other Writings by Thomas Kinsey. Timaeus and Critias by Plato. Two dialogues. And okay. Oblomov by Ivan Goncharov. And I think this had some really funny parts to it. I don't know if it's entirely a comedy, but really in the premise of the story feels really modern, and in some ways a throwback to things like Tristram Shandy a little bit. The main character just for almost the entire novel, half the novel, doesn't even want to get out of bed. So it has that kind of start to it. The Confessions of a Child of the Century by Alfred de Musset. And this is an autobiographical story. Is it George Sand? Yeah, yeah. It's the romance or relationship or infatuation that Musset um, had with um, George Sand. Selected works of Cicero, really not my favorite. Um, the Uncanny by Sigmund Freud. I found these essays or cases or whatever they're called, I just found them fascinating, um, readable. I think Sigmund Freud is a really entertaining writer. I'm not sure how much psychological value they have, but it's good reading. Selected Poems by Robert Browning. It's one of my favorite poets of the period. Not that I have many or know a lot, but a great big Russian book that I haven't read, so I still haven't read this. It's Petersburg by Andrei Belly. It's supposed to be one of the great like modern or modernist novels, landmark Russian novel, things like that. Um, so I want to read it. Common Sense by Thomas Paine. Italian Journey by Goethe. This was one of the more enjoyable. It's nonfiction. It's his time. Um, he took a holiday or just had a time traveling, and he went to Italy. And it's one of the more entertaining and insightful, really interesting things that I've read by Goethe. Talking about all the art and architecture and the landscape of Italy. Um, yeah, really interesting. The Turn of the Screw and the Aspern Papers by Henry James. Um, the Turn of the Screw is um, quite good. The Village of Stepanchikovo. I'm not sure how you say that, by Dostoevsky. Earlier this month, I read the first half. I read about 100. It's a thin thing, 100 pages. I read it years ago, but it's translated by Ignat Avesy, and it's a comedy. This is hilarious, and if someone was looking to read something by Dostoevsky, a novel, um, maybe didn't want to read one of the big books, but also didn't really want to start with a short story, this is a great start. It might not give you an impression of all of the big themes that Dostoevsky is known for, but just for entertainment value, it's just great. Mayor of Casterbridge. Um, it has some preposterous storylines in it, uh, but at least the opening scene, it is really memorable. It really opens with a bang. Thucydides, The History of the Peloponnesian War. I think I have 2 copies of this. Let's see. On Aesthetic Education of Man by Friedrich Schiller. This is by the German playwright who wrote the Robbers, and Wallenstein, and all of those great German plays. This is philosophical treatise. The Power and the Glory by Graham Greene. Really not one of my favorite writers. This is probably my favorite thing that I've read by him. It's why I have it. And is this one of the... Yeah, well, anyway. So I haven't read this. It's a Harlot High and Low by Balzac. And um, before I had read um, Lost Illusions, I was reading something by Oscar Wilde, and he was talking about how um, how affecting the death of one of the characters who is in Lost Illusions really hit him. So there was like an emotional death, and I won't spoil anything, but I read Lost Illusions, and the character doesn't die. And I find out that the character is followed up in a sequel, if you want to call it that, in A Harlot High and Low. And so I got the end of this like really great book, one of my favorite Balzac novels, and I thought, well, the person didn't die. The person dies in this one. I still need to read it. Portrait of a Lady. One of my first novels by Henry James, and I loved it. One of the reasons that I'm so interested in kind of unlocking this author. He has a lot of books and a lot of fans, so I really feel like I'm missing something. Letters on England by Voltaire, and there's something very curious about this. So Voltaire goes to England and he writes these satirical, philosophical, typical Voltaire essays or pieces, and has this thing. At some point, this thing gets published, and this is translated by Leonard Tancock. And if anyone out there knows, I would really like to have a resolution on this. But from what I understand, Voltaire wrote this in English, and it was translated into French when it was finally published. And the curious thing is, what's going on with the translation? This isn't the English that Voltaire wrote. And if it's translated from the French, it's not translated from what Voltaire wrote. It's really odd. I mean, I love this copy, but if there's like an English version of what Voltaire wrote at the time, I would absolutely, I would just love to read it. It's just so interesting to me. Maybe he did his own translation. I don't know. The Red and the Black by Stendhal. Andy, move it. The Red and the Black by Stendhal. Yeah, just one of my favorite French novels. It's one of those society novels. The character goes up through the ranks of society, and it's immoral and decadent and all those things. Don Juan, however you say that, by Lord Byron. It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite books of poetry. A long epic poem. I love the beginning. He says he's making fun of like Wordsworth and a couple other people, and Coleridge, and he goes. And Coleridge is busy explaining metaphysics to the nation. I just wish somebody would explain his explanation. Yeah, this is the whole thing. It's unfinished by Byron, but incredible. Tacitus, Annals of Imperial Rome. I think I have 2 copies of this. I haven't finished either. I really need to. It's been years, so I at some point I want to be able to. I want to be reading these historical Roman authors. Another copy of Against Nature by Hausman. I adore that cover. Look at all that decadent yellow and the yellow wrapped book there. Mademoiselle de Maupin by Théophile Gautier. Again, I don't know how I'm pronouncing these things. A really gorgeously written, strange, unorthodox experimental novel. There's it has a long preface, and then there's like a novel that sort of begins. It turns into a play. We just have dialogue. Um, there's like art essays, like essay forms in the middle of the book, and all the while it's just uh, Gautier's masterful, luxurious, intoxicating prose, um, and the story itself um, is even scandalous by today's standards. It's just amazing. The Pillow Book, another unorthodox, strange. This is an ancient. Is it? Yeah, ancient Japanese novel, if you want to call it that. It's like a collection of thoughts. I don't know. Selected writing on art and literature by Baudelaire. Um, and yeah, like I just passed. Um, he has just just opening this up now. Now this is what I want to read for the rest of the night. He has a piece on Gautier. He has a piece on Madame Bovary by Flaubert. Um, I really enjoy his criticism. Not really a book that it's curious to me that this is even a Penguin classic. I feel like it's not the kind of book that anyone reads for enjoyment. It's Vitruvius on architecture, and it's I don't even know what you would call it, but it's just like a handbook on architecture. Another copy of Vanity Fair, fabulous cover by Thackeray, William Makepeace Thackeray. Um, and I just talked about, I made a quick mention in one of the other shelves, and one of the things that just like dragged me through this, like raced me through the book, is like how much he's poking fun at everyone, like the mockery. It's like a satire, social satire novel, and the way that he um, just like dismantles the ridiculousness of almost every character just had me howling. The 12 Caesars by Suetonius, um, and this was great. It's really fun reading, and um, for some of those histories that I have trouble with, um, I get along much better with biographies. So like the works by Suetonius or Plutarch, who I'm always talking about. Either or by Kierkegaard. It's a, let me see. It's actually not that long. It's got a bunch. This has a bunch of stuff in it. I haven't read the whole entire thing, but for some reason, whenever I'm in a mood, I'll read Kierkegaard before I go to bed. One of my favorite books, just flat out, no qualification, The Prelude by William Wordsworth. It's like a little book, a long autobiographical poem. Very, I mean, not at all like Byron's Don Juan, which is like an epic poem. This is a wholly new thing. And the interesting thing is that this is the four versions that we have. And so there's two kind of shorter versions, and then a longer version, and then much later he did a lot of revisions, and it has all four of them in here. Discourses and Selected Writings by Epictetus. It's a handy little volume of Stoic philosophy. The Philosophical Dictionary by Voltaire. And I have, I think I have another like a abridged version, um, and it's a collection of essays arranged in alphabetical order. So it's not really a dictionary by the way that by today's standards or how we've known it for a couple hundred years. Um, Let me see. Come on. Is it gonna not have? It has to have the table of contents. Oh, for Pete's sake. Well, so there's an essay on Abraham and the soul and angels and atheism. All is good. um, yeah, it's just Voltaire unwinding, unraveling, unwinding. Yeah. And we're getting at the very, very end, and it's coming to, I believe, a very fitting conclusion. We have Bartlett's Familiar Quotations. It's that just great big book of quotes by everybody. Let's see. Nietzsche, we could skip Nietzsche. Yeats. Somewhere beyond the curtain of distorting days lives that lonely thing that shone before these eyes, targeted, trod like spring from the winding stair. And you can almost, it's just amazing. What is this? Okay. I'm not so sure how useful this kind of book is now, but I bought this maybe, I don't know, 12 or 15 years ago. The internet wasn't nearly as accessible as it is today, but now I'm looking at a whole bunch of quotes by George Sand, Nathaniel Hawthorne, and then we'll end with a 2-volume Oxford English Dictionary. Volume N through Z and A through M. And again, probably, it's not like I pull these things out anymore, or even really did use them as much as, well, I just like having them. It's one of those things I've, in some ways, like it's almost like romantic. Like there's a good probability that the words contained in these books contains the words in all of my books combined. Just different examples of unique arrangements. They're all in here. Okay, so that's it. We are done with my library tour. We've gone through every shelf, I think every book. If you're interested in any of these Penguin Classics, let me know. You can send me an email. But let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think about these books, anything that I had to say about them, anything like that. So leave a comment if you'd like. Thank you for watching. And thank you for going on this whole tour with me. I hope it wasn't too tedious. I hope it was enjoyable. Okay, thank you. Take care.